Welcome back to everyone. We are now have moved over to the rain garden out front of the Borough Hall and Avon Grove Library, as we said, and we will continue with the site visit portion of the program now. Who's talking?
Yeah, so now so we're gonna just take a look at the rain garden in person, and this is a chance for people to ask questions about any of the construction or anything that you see here. I know we went over a lot of it already, but we have Chris and Holly here, as well as Eric, I think, where he is over there, and Greg, and so you can ask them questions as well. You can type it in the chat. You guys obviously can ask it live. But this is the garden that we saw today. I'm gonna let Chris, and if you want to chime in, Holly, because I know you spent a lot of time on here, feel free to kind of talk about the process and things that you encountered while you were out here, and why maybe it took a little bit longer than we anticipated, things like that. And then I'll talk about the plants and the maintenance and all of that. Does that sound good?
Holly?
So we actually came out here first and did the mark out and everything. We started digging and there was a pipe that we did not foresee it being there. So we actually had to make the rain garden a little bit wider and then cut it on the backside a little bit more to make sure that we had the right amount of drainage. So from there, we excavated it out. These guys were great, moving the soil and everything. What else? What are the problems that we face?
Cable line.
What'd you say?
The cable line.
The cable line. Yeah, the cable line came right through the middle of it. But actually, the weather kind of played a little bit of a factor, which slowing down our process. We were hoping to get this done within a week. It took us, like Shane said, 2 weeks to do it. After we dug it all out and excavated it, we got the soil put in there. After that, we did the piping. Actually, we had a little bit of problems with the piping because of where the catch basin is on the other side. So we had to make sure that we had enough drop so that the water, once it filled up, it had somewhere to go, and we weren't going to flood out the basement, because that was a major concern for the Borough Hall. We covered the pipe with the rock. Then we put the soil in. We built up the berm on the outside so that the water doesn't overflow over the sidewalk, which was another concern for the borough. Then we came out and mulched it and planted it. And now actually there are people volunteering their time to weed it, which is really helpful actually. And the guys don't have to do it from the DPW.
So I think the interesting thing, is the underdrain pipe, because typically when the public works guys put in PVC piping, they always keep it at like a 2% slope. And we had come out here and we measured, and it was perfectly 2% slope. And we said, you know what? We don't need it that steep, So we were able to get it down to 1% and get the underdrain pipe down a little bit lower, because we don't want water rushing out of here, but we do want that when it fills up to be able to handle the water and get out of here. So it's a little different philosophy when we're dealing with things like this versus what the public works guys are normally dealing with. So it's pretty cool to see, how they work and teach them how we tend to do these things. So that was, I think that was a big issue. Plus, you guys did find some asphalt. And whenever we dig any place that's been developed, something unexpected happens.
It used to be a parking lot for the railroad.
Yeah, so you find asphalt, you find a pipe, you find a cable line that wasn't marked, and you're not sure if it's being used or not.
Yeah.
We found a concrete staircase in one of our gardens in one project. We dug down. We had to get somebody to take it out. So it's always, and then like Holly said, you change the design a little bit, but you still maintain the storage. So that's why it's always important to kind of have an engineer on site as you're doing this to make sure that if anything comes up, you can make the tweaks. And it's always good to have great public works guys, because what we found is that we need to get the water from here to here, and we want to make sure it's going to be safe. And some of these guys come up with some great solutions, So that's been really, really nice to work with them, So
I'm going to go over kind of the planting plan right now, and you guys are going to use this BMP checklist to look at things at some point. But I'm going to point out some of the stuff now. So as you can see, the rain garden's there, but we did everything. We pulled out the turf all the way out to the sidewalk. So the plant palette, some of the stuff that we have out here, we might not use in there because that's going to hold more water. At the same time, that also is going to dry out. So those plants have to be pretty darn versatile. They have to be able to handle the wet for a certain period, and then they have to be able to handle the dry for a certain period. ryeweed, and this is a cultivar that stays lower on the outside instead of the inside, like where you might want to see it. That's this plant right here. And then the mountain mint, and these are all on one of your handouts, the plant list. I think I sent it to everyone virtually. You all have it on the second page of this. Mountain mint is something that covers ground. It spreads by runners. It has semi-evergreen foliage. So you don't want your rain garden to be completely empty in the wintertime. You actually want some green mulch, which I'm going to call the plants. And that's a great plant for that, as well as the tufted hair grass, which is the grass you see in here. That tends to green up really early. It's a cool season grass, so we like that. It gives a good cover. And then we have some lobelias, which some of you who are gardeners might be familiar with. The red one's almost done blooming. The blue one blooms a little bit later. They attract wildlife. They tend to grow by streams, and so we put them in the center of the rain garden. We have some asters in the drier areas on the berm and on the outside. And we also have a ground cover for under this maple tree, which was already here. It was an existing tree. So we had some light variation as well that we kind of had to like incorporate into the planting design. So purple coneflower is another one that we put outside on the edge because it's a great pollinator plant. It's pretty, people like it, as well as the penstemon or the beard's tongue over there. So the important thing that I'm trying to talk about here is you mulch it initially, and then you hope that these plants spread and become the mulch so that you're not consistently having to mulch it. Areas that we look for would be open spots. This is newly planted. This planting is only 4 months old. So you can see how much these little teeny plants that were about 2 inches by 5 inches, little landscape clumps have spread. It's more cost effective to do it that way. And they spread rather quickly. So they're forming like the living mulch here. And that's what we want to see. We don't want to see mulch. We don't want to see open spots. That's where weeds will come in. So speaking of weeds, you do have to manage these systems, especially the first couple months, but even the first couple years, the first year being the most involved, where you don't want to let things like this get a hold. So this is obviously not a plant, and it's easier now when you look at the plant palette here. You can see that this isn't one that we planted. It doesn't belong. There's only one of them. So that's kind of, for people who don't know their plants exactly, it's an easy way to pull something out. So basically that's what you're doing. You're looking for weeds, things that came in on their own, and you're pulling them out. So, or you're treating them. So I put together a list of typical garden invasives, and these are specific to this garden. So I came out here in August and took a look and did a little bit of weeding myself. And Japanese hops, which all of you are probably, I'm going to take this off. It's only you, Fran. You guys are probably familiar with Japanese hops. It's everywhere. It swallows up real estate like no other plant. Well, it's over at one of those rock outlets in that corner over there, and that's something to really be aware of. It's good to pull. You can actually pull it when it's little, which would be in May, maybe early June. But once it starts growing and sending out its runners, it's a little bit harder to remove mechanically, which would be hand pulling. So you might have to go to a herbicide treatment. Definitely don't let it go to seed. Never let any invasives go to seed, because then they will spread and then they become your nightmare. Get them before. If you can't get them out, cut them, bag the seed heads and take them away. So Japanese hops to me is the main red flag in here. They also have nutsedge, which probably came in with the mulch, or it could have been here. And that's another one to look out for. I saw it in here. It looks different than the grasses. It's a little bit bigger. Sedges have edges. So you can just look at the plant and see it's not rounded. It's not a grass. But what they do have are runners. This late in the season, they form runners and tubers. So if you pull it like I just did, sorry guys, I probably created a few more of these. So they should really be treated with herbicide, like paint it on, just selectively paint it on. Don't spray it broadly or anything like that. But there were some big patches of this in this garden as well, which mainly up in that area of the existing bed. But still, even if it's not in this garden that we planted, it's close enough that it can spread and cause a problem. And then if you look on the back of the invasive species, I put trash on there. This will collect trash. It's a public space. There's a lot of activity going on. So just be mindful of that and pull that out as needed. I put Canada thistle on here. It is not in this garden, thank God. Who knows where it is though, and it will move in. If it's nearby, it will blow in. So that's something, if you see it immediately, you want to treat it and get it out. You do not want this plant in there. It will spread, and it will spread to other places, and it is a noxious weed on the Pennsylvania noxious weed list. So that's really, those are the main problems we saw here. We really didn't see many other problems. And so I'm gonna have you guys use this list and walk around and just kind of answer these questions and see what you see. These are the type of things you would look for in any BMP, whether it's an infiltration basin or a rain garden. And a lot of it, you know, so we're gonna break and take an exercise. Those of you viewing at home can do this as well if Grant walks around with the iPad. But you have this form that you can look at. We'll take a couple minutes to just walk around and do that, and then we'll come back.
Pretty good. So the only other thing I'm thinking is, we want to walk around and actually give like a little tour of the rain garden, tell what's going on here, the outlets, what we see above the ground over here. You know, maybe talk about the berm and the way the water, you know. Yeah. And I don't know who best would do that. I don't know, you know, I don't know if that would be a Holly or a Chris.
Probably Holly.
Yeah. Do you want to go?
Ask her.
Yeah. Just kind of give like a more in-depth tour of what we see above ground here, what happens when it goes around the corner, and we'll talk about the roof, you know.
Okay.
You want to do that now?
Yeah, we can go right now.
Okay.
See? So that's something you would look for. Whoever comes out and inspects.
Oh my God, yeah, exactly.
And if you want to pull the mask off,
Oh.
like she did.
Doesn't matter to me.
All right.
Makes it look better, right? So we got actually a lot of the roof that's actually coming into the garden. We have the upper roof tier, which goes into this lower tier of the garden. I mean, into the roof, and then the this part goes into the 2 downspouts that we actually disconnected. So we cut here at the base, and then we put a PVC pipe over here underground at a nice little slope, and then the water actually comes out through here, which is a little clogged actually. So I'm just gonna pull that out, and now it's clear. So from here, the water will go into the garden and pond, and you can see on the outside that there is a slight berm, which helps make sure that the water actually stays in here and doesn't go over the sidewalk. If we continue into the garden, there is a pipe that starts here and then goes over to where Chris is actually at. And underneath this right now, there is actually some rock that is over the pipe to make sure that the soil does not go into the pipe and clog it. Over there is the atrium drain. So once it fills up, and it goes into this atrium drain, and the atrium drain is connected this way back to a catch basin, which we'll go over there in a second. But the other downspout and inlet is over here as well. So we have 2 sources of where the water is coming from, and then 1 source of where it's going out of. The overflow, if it doesn't go into the atrium drain, we'll go over this rock because this is set lower. And these are the weeds. These are the weeds that Shane were talking about before. So we need to make sure that we pull those. So that pipe, Grant. The pipe with the green top and the atrium drain is piped actually to here. And this is where the overflow goes, which actually goes underneath and around the building. So that probably took us about 3 or 4 days to figure out the piping situation, because we wanted to make sure that we had an overflow that was not going over the sidewalk and flooding out where everybody was coming in and stuff. So
Thank you for that overview and tour of the rain garden, Holly.
you're welcome. Good job.
Okay, so we're gonna reconvene and talk about what we saw. I'm just gonna go through the list. Did anyone see trash?
Yes.
Yes. So that's something you would mark off and you know, if it's small enough to clean it up, obviously if someone threw like a refrigerator in here, which hopefully we never would do, you would get help, come back and do it. One of the big ones is ponding. We don't want to see ponding, especially if it's been a while after a rain event. A couple days, fine, but after that, we want to see it fully drained. This garden tends to drain very quickly, so we haven't had any issues with that. If you do see ponding, you want to identify what the cause is. Is it because too much fine sediments have gotten here and clogged the soil? Is it because mulch clogged the drain over there because it floated up and plugged it up? These are things that you would want to look for. What else? Erosion. So erosion, you would more look at that where the inlets are, like where the rainwater is coming in. And we use large river rocks kind of to prevent that from happening, where we know there's going to be a lot of water coming in one concentrated spot. So we don't really see any erosion now. It doesn't mean it can't happen, but I don't think we're going to see it here, but it's something to look for. The other thing is, and the main thing, you know, I know I push the plants, but the vegetation to me is pretty important. Looking for gaps in cover, identifying things that don't belong here, and obviously containing them before they go to seed and before they start spreading or before they become a problem. Don't just wait and say, I'll get it next time, because usually next time it's a little too late. So did anyone notice anything with the vegetation when they were looking around? I can point out some things. So somebody was looking down here and looking at these roots, and this is actually what this plant does. It spreads by runners. We want that. It was a desired plant, so we want to see it spreading that way. A lot of these plants are going to spread by seed, but this one spreads by runner. So kind of knowing a little bit more about the plants that are in your garden is always a good thing. We did use a pretty selective palette. I think we have 7 maybe different species in here for this size garden. We probably didn't need 7. We could have gotten away with 5, but you know, it's front of the library, so I wanted more flowering plants.
How do you control the bees?
You don't need to control the bees. We're feeding them. So
I walking by and it gets done.
no, in
Yellow
fact,
jackets are bees, man.
so this is like one of the best pollinator plants, and I do this a lot. Like if I can walk right through it, they're not gonna bother me. Like they're just not. They're more interested in getting nectar from this plant. It's pretty fascinating. So obviously, if you have a bee allergy, you want to kind of not do what I just did. But like I said, I've used this plant several times. I've never been stung. If anyone's going to get stung, it will be me. So I always find it pretty fascinating. So you let the bees alone. You're helping them. So that's another thing. These plants, they're native plants. They help our native fauna. Birds, bees, butterflies, small mammals can use it for habitat. Can get seed from here, so it's good for wildlife habitat as well.
We had a beehive once near a public walkway, and bees will fly up and over shrubs. So we put a tall shrub between the walkway and where the bees were, and it made the bees go up and over your head. And nobody got stung, because sometimes you get stung because they fly into you and they get stuck in your shirt. So that was like a good tool where there were beehives. Yeah.
So that's pretty much this garden in a nutshell. I have to say it looks pretty good, and I do think it's because people are paying attention to it, including Greg, the manager, as well as his staff. So I don't have much more to add about that. I did include a typical maintenance schedule with the handouts at the end, and basically it's everything I'm talking about. Pretty much March through October, you're monitoring and you're weeding, okay? I know I put every 2 weeks, and that's fine. You guys are here a lot, you can see what's going on. But once a month, I would say, at a minimum, come out and check how things are going. The other thing that we didn't talk about was cutting things back. So these are all perennials. We didn't use any shrubs. They already had shrubs back there. We didn't want to block the library. And so in late winter, when the ground is kind of frozen, you can come out with a string trimmer and just cut everything back to like 6 inches, and it'll all flush out in no time. And so that's kind of the recommended thing. If you can leave it up all winter long, it's good because again, it's good habitat for wildlife. Plus it looks pretty. I mean, we pick plants that should look pretty in the wintertime as well with their seed heads. And the only time I would say cut it earlier would be if you notice voles coming in and eating at the roots of the plants. And you can tell because there'll be little like burrows and things like that, and the roots get nibbled up. So then you might cut a little bit earlier. Otherwise, this first year, I would wait and see how it does and cut it back late winter, like March. But that's pretty much it for this. It's a pretty small, manageable area. It's not too big. It's not cumbersome. It's something anyone can do. See, the library's right there. They can look out on it whenever they want.
Question.
And does anyone have any questions?
Got
Chat?
one.
Oh, okay.
I got one from David Ross. Oh, hold on. Come on, phone. It was basically, will the 3 inches of mulch deter the seeding, self-seeding? Are you worried that the mulch will prevent things from self-seeding?
To some degree, but most of these plants are just going to keep getting bigger. Like they're pretty small for what they're supposed to be right now. That mulch is going to break down pretty darn quick. There's going to be bare spots from weeding or just, I don't know, even just water running over it. So no, I think the seeds are still going to do their job as well. But we tried to balance that with runners as well as self-sowers.